Hey, everybody, welcome back. Happy Skews Day to you. It's May 2nd, 2023. I'm Trey. That's Mark. How you doing, Mark? We're both a little under the weather, I think, today. And producer Matt, the whole Skews crew is got a little
Yeah,
got the sniffles and stuff going on, but that's okay.
yeah. Luckily, we don't have to call in sick to work because we're on fucking strike. So we're talking about that a little bit. I hate talking about showbiz stuff, but this is what's going on in our industry is sort of like relevant to what's going on in a lot of industries, and it's sort of like the to borrow a line from Cory Doctorow's, a writer I read a lot, the enshittification of everything downstream from tech and finance. It's a lot of fun. Before we get to that, let's talk about. Do you watch any of the White House Correspondents' Dinner, Trey?
I saw some clips online, I saw Biden doing Dark Brandon, stuff like that.
Mhm.
I believe Roy hosted it, which is great. But I didn't watch the whole thing, though.
Yeah, I helped Roy out with his speech when he did the Congressional Correspondents' Dinner a couple of years ago, and he hit my manager up to see if I was available to work on this, and I was like, "Oh, shit, I hope to get to work on the White House Correspondents' Dinner," and then I saw that it happened. I was like, "Oh, I guess that's how I find out you didn't get any of everything in this business. You see it happen." But it was Roy knocked it out of the park. I was hoping like to get it so I could go and burn the building down because I find the whole thing gross, but the people who did it were funny. Biden's speech was pretty good. Um, so this news dropped. The Supreme Court just fucking keeps getting grosser and grosser. So John Roberts' wife, Jane, she apparently has made over $10 million the last few years as a sort of a headhunter for high-priced law firms. Now the order of events here is fucking crazy because she was a big-time lawyer, but she pivoted to this role because she said she told a friend that the change was motivated by the desire to avoid the appearance of conflicts of interest, given that her husband
Mhm.
was now the highest-ranking judge in the country. So instead, what she did is got a job placing lawyers at these high priced law firms who all have business before the court. And so if
Right.
you're in charge of one of these white shoe law firms and the chief justice of the Supreme Court's wife comes to you and says, you should pay me to do this job for you, I'd cost $1 million a year.
Mhm.
Would you interpret that as extortion?
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely the, appearance of some impropriety there, but turns out that's like chapter 1 of the Supreme Court's playbook, evidently. It's like, I wonder when the Clarence Thomas stuff was first happening, we were talking about it on a Patreon episode, I think, and I was saying, like, that I wouldn't be surprised to if they're all doing something like that or if it, like, continues to come out, and so, here we are.
They had a hearing. The Senate held a hearing about all this stuff today, and one of the guys testifying was George W. Bush's former Attorney General, who's now a judge somewhere, Michael Mukasey. And John Ossoff asked him, like, "Do you think would you take a ride in a private jet with the billionaire?" And the guy's like, "Well, I feel like it'd be," basically said, "I'd be endangering the friendship. It'd be rude to not accept a ride on a private jet to a high price
Right.
vacation." It's like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta understand, like, it could have hurt that billionaire's feelings, Mark,
Right.
which
Mhm.
we don't want that to happen. Nobody wants a billionaire to have their feelings hurt. So, really, he had no choice in the matter. He had to ride on the private jet.
Yeah. By the way, this news came out because of a whistleblower who used to work with Jane Roberts. Let me quote from her name's Kendall B. Bryce, and he quote from her right here. When I found out that the spouse of this chief justice was soliciting business from law firms, I knew immediately that it was wrong. During the time I was there, I was discouraged from ever raising the issue. And the clients that were her law these law firms are not people you should otherwise ever feel sorry for. They're taking money from like Monsanto. If you've seen Michael
Mhm,
Clayton, you know this game works, right?
mhm.
They're trying to defend clients who poison kids to death.
Right. Yeah.
But she's like, these law firms have nowhere to go. There's no like controlling authority for this. And if you're wondering, even for this field, Robert's 10.3 million in compensation puts her toward the top of the pay scale for legal headhunters. So like, she's very very good at her job, I imagine. So yeah, all
It's
good.
just one of those things where it's like it just seems like that's just how it all works at that level, like in the upper echelons of society. They're all like, they got board seats or whatever. They get
Hmm.
like in name only jobs, consulting work or
Hmm.
whatever. You're making hundreds of thousands of dollars years in consulting work, and it's all just like, you know, under the table glad handing bullshit between them. They just, scratch each other's backs all the time. That's part of, to them, I'm sure it's like, well, why even be? in the upper reaches of American society if you can't, profit off of the networking in that way.
It's it's a big club, but we ain't in it, buddy.
Exactly.
Also, nobody wants to work anymore, Trey.
Right.
None of these jobs are real. Fuck. I was thinking the other day about because we're headed towards a debt ceiling crisis, like sleepwalking towards it, to
Uh-huh.
the collapse of everything, and no one seems to be doing much about it, except the Republicans passed like a do nothing messaging bill that would cut every dollar for poor people in America, and I was like, well, that's a really weird fight because the law requires Congress to raise the debt ceiling, but the Constitution requires the president to defend the full faith and credit of the United States government. So those two things are kind of at odds. And I was like, what if Biden just unilaterally raised it, saying the Constitution required him to? And of course, it would go to the Supreme Court. And I was like, well, maybe the federal government stops paying the judiciary branch's paychecks because they're cash strapped. That would make the issue real to them. But I'm like, they don't even need their 300 grand a year base salary because they're all
Right.
got side gigs as billionaire house pets. So
Right.
this is all so fucking stupid and gross. Anyway, I don't know.
Indeed it is. Well, let's get into it. With us as always is producer Matt behind the scenes pulling the strings. This is Weekly Skews. I do want to remind you before we continue, of course, a couple items of business. Number one, if you'd like to see me perform live, and you should, go to TreyCrowder.com, check out my upcoming dates. Got a couple coming up in the next month or two. It's a little light, but then in the summer, moving into the fall, going to be going all over the place and still adding all kinds of dates for beyond. So please come and see me, TreyCrowder.com. Get your tickets now. Number two, you can check out my special available on Amazon called Damn Boy. If you want to do that, Corey and Drew have specials on there too. You can get them all together or individually, whatever you want to do. And then lastly, if you enjoy this program and would like to show your support, you can do so by signing up on Patreon, weeklyskews.com/more, or you can go on Patreon and look me up. You'll find it either way. $5 a month gets you access to full-length bonus episodes like the one we did last week, part one of a Skew&A, taking the burning questions and comments from all the skewers out there. And we're doing the second part of that later this week. We've got a whole bunch of episodes in the archive and plenty more to come, so we hope you'll check it out and support the show in the process. Okay. As for the show tonight, Mark mentioned it up top. The Writers Guild is on strike. I don't think this is inconsistent for us at all. Matter of fact, au contraire, quite the opposite. We're a very labor-friendly podcast here, Mark. We've covered all of the big labor disputes in this country over the past few years. Very proud to do it, solidarity and all that stuff. It's just that this one happens to be the only one with which we are in direct participation. The Writers Guild has walked out and is on strike, and it's all the news in Hollywood right now. We'll talk about it a little later, but first, before all that, we begin with the Daily Dumbass. Matt, graphic, please. Tonight's DD, this Minnesota Republican for apparently being willing to pay $350 for 3 joints. Warren Limmer.
Says it can any person can have 8 plants at home. Now, I've seen some of the videos of DEA raids. Some of these plants are 8 and 10 feet tall. You can have 8 of them. You can have a privacy fence made of these products in your backyard.
Yeah. Privacy fence of
2 ounces. Plants. Just 2 ounces is equivalent to 3 joints.
What?
And you can possess up to...
You can hear some of the people in the State House start laughing when he says that, which is funny to me. I don't know if that was the Democrats in attendance or what, but either way, it's like clearly there were people there who were very aware of the blunder he had just made. 2 ounces is a shitload of weed. I mean, it's like that. Not even those like Cheech and Chong fucking cigar size joints. I don't think would make up 3 of those for 2 ounces.
So they were debating weed legalization in Minnesota. It looks like it's going to happen. Although the bill, the Senate, he's in the Senate. The bill the Senate passed is different than the one the House passed. They got to do one of those conferences and work out the kinks in the bills before they have to repass them, and then the governor can sign it. So who knows if there's any bumps along the way in that. But I try to figure out Warren Limmer's whole deal. He's pretty bog standard right wing psycho. Nothing QAnon level crazy, but hates gays. Hates poor people. The normal shit. Sorry, go ahead.
I just didn't know. I didn't realize that this. I'm shocked that this is just now going on in the state of Minnesota specifically. Like, I just didn't realize that it was even something that was hotly debated in, one of the more otherwise sane seeming states, by American standards.
Right.
And I saw some of the other clips from this, debate they're having or whatever. And it's like, reefer madness lives on, dude. The way some of them talk about, they literally talk about like overdose ODs on cannabis, and like how, you can't test for it. So people will be driving high. You can't like do a roadside test for it. So people will be driving high maniacally all the time, and how it'll ruin your life and all this stuff. Just the same like playbook that Dare was going from when I was a kid and everything. And I just didn't realize that they were still out here doing it at that level, but I guess they are. I know why they're really doing it though, but anyway, go ahead. Maybe
I mean, I don't even know why they're really, I mean, I guess they can lock up more black and brown people, but I think my favorite one of their takes was one guy was like, I used to smoke weed in college and I almost flunked out because of it.
Yeah.
Like, okay, it's weed's fault you're lazy and stupid, because
that same guy then talked about getting 2 DUIs or whatever.
Yeah.
also back then. I'm sure he's still cool with booze though.
There was one sheriff who was like testifying that they'll need increased police funding if they increase police funding for having to do less enforcement of low-level drug crime, because, like you said, of the driving while high thing, as if people aren't already driving while high when it's illegal. Like, it's like, this is a fantasy world where people aren't smoking weed already in Minnesota.
Dude, it's the opposite. I mean, I guess maybe it's him trying to get out in front of it, but I know that like with the cops, with their lobbying and stuff, when it comes to this law, it's the opposite. They don't want to see their budgets eventually go down because they don't have to dedicate the time required to prosecuting weed anymore, and they got to protect that budget. And also obviously, the prisons and big pharma and all that. When I said I know why they're really doing it, that's what I meant. They've got, they're in somebody's back pocket getting donations from, someone who matters. And I know I've talked about this before, so I won't do the whole thing, but I did a little piece on this for this news show pilot that didn't get picked up in the state of Tennessee. And they'll like interviewed a bunch of the people involved with it, like Tennessee Republicans, before everybody knew just how insane they were. And like, they would just literally like openly tell you all that. Like, they weren't even making it a secret. You could ask them like, how do your constituents feel about this? They're like, oh, everybody's pretty much on board with it. There's not a lot of opposition to it. It's like, and is it going to pass? Absolutely not. Why not? It's like, well, there's a lot of interest involved who are not ready to see that change or whatever. And it's like,
it's we got a Jack Daniels factory.
Shame to bullshit about it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. A lot of fun stuff. I mean, remember that we talked about on the show, the guy who said that the cop who was like, but if you legalize weed, we'll have to euthanize our weed sniffing dog. Do you hate dogs? So some other Minnesota legislative fun. This is one of the opponents of the legalizing weed bill who had the weirdest Zoom thing happen.
This is fun.
Yeah. Representative Anderson.
Yes.
Senator Barr.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you're listening to the podcast version, he was laying down with his shirt off, and also his Zoom background is how a bill becomes a law.
Schoolhouse Rock.
Yeah. So
look, there it is. There's a screen grab of it. These people still ain't figured Zoom out by now. It's like, also, he made a background. Do you know what I mean? Like, he has to have some knowledge of how Zoom works, or he wouldn't have gone through the trouble of making the background. Maybe he got his wife or somebody to do it. I don't know. But either way, it's not a good look.
This guy's name is Calvin Barr, spelled B-A-H-R, and he's like one of the most right-wing members of the Minnesota State Senate, and he's against smoking weed or getting gay married or wearing shirts on Zoom, apparently. But these are the same people who think we're all lazy for when to work from home, and here's a guy with his shirt off in the legislative hearing. Yeah.
All right, so our honorable mention for Daily Dumbass tonight is all of us for thinking Judge Dredd was way off for the future we're all looking at. Let's see this clip of who else? Spaghetti Man, Ron DeSantis.
Well, we're stopping jailbreak in the state of Florida today with making sure we have tough bond policies and bail policies. We're putting pedophiles to death, hopefully, with this today.
All right. So QAnon shit. So DeSantis is making a move to try to legalize the death penalty for non-killing related offenses, which the Supreme Court has held, unreasonable under the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual. Since I think it was the 80s, I forgot. I'm going to talk about SFSA. I don't know exactly when, but it's long been considered out of bounds because it's disproportional to the crime. And look, you never want to be on video defending pedophiles.
Right.
So I'm not going to do that.
No.
Because I don't want to. No one should. But I will say that the incentive structure of this is not quite thought through. But politicians will always go harder on the grossest crimes because there's no
pushback.
Just like I don't want to, no one's going to stand up and be like, this is a bad idea. Yeah.
It's not about, right. Look, nobody's defending child rapists or whatever. It's not about that part. It's that like the last thing we need to be doing is giving the state of Florida like more ability to execute anyone or upping the number of people that they are in charge of executing, because like that's just one part of it. That's one part for me. It's like you can't trust them to not ever get it wrong. Like that's the whole reason I oppose the death penalty in the first place. I've said it many times. There are people out there who I think, nothing is lost if that person is put to death, truly monstrous criminals or whatever. But that's not the point. As long as we ever execute innocent people, which we know we have many, many times, then it's just got to go. And then when trying to expand it is the opposite of what should be happening, because you can't trust these motherfuckers. And the second part that I don't like about it is those people cheering when he says we're putting pedophiles to death, we all know that a lot of them also think that gay men or trans people are automatically pedophiles, right? Like a lot of them think that or assume that. So I view it as not that far of a cry from them cheering that type of thing instead. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which is pretty scary in my opinion. So yeah, it's not about defending child rapists. It's just about, maintaining some semblance of sanity.
I saw criminal justice reporter Randy Balco talking about this earlier. And do you want to guess what state leads the nation in death row exonerations? Florida. So they already been caught trying to execute innocent people a bunch of times. Now you want to introduce more kids. The whole thing is just gross. But I was thinking about the incentive structure here for criminals, because like Republicans seem to think criminals respond to incentives like normal people. Like people don't think through cost-benefit ratios in most things they do in life unless they're talking with like an investment advisor. Nobody robs a liquor store thinking I'm doing this because I'm only getting 10 years in prison, but if you up it to 20, I'll stop doing it. That's not really how this works. But let's say they did respond to incentive structures. I was thinking about the first scene in Heat when they rob the armored car and Waingro loses his cool and kills one of the security guards. So it escalates to a murder one beef. So they decided to dispatch the other two guards because it's already murder one. You already got a death penalty. Why wouldn't you kill the witnesses so you have a less chance of getting convicted?
I see where you're going.
So if you're a child molester,
it's delicate.
You diddle the kid, and you're like, well, if the kid tells I'm going to get the death penalty, what's your fucking?
How do you stop that from happening?
Right.
Silence the kid, and if it's a death penalty either way, why would you not then do that? I mean, it's super fucking dark, but like, it makes a lot of sense to me.
I don't. I don't think
get what you're saying.
I don't think criminals. I don't think criminals think through incentive structures like that. But Republicans do. So I'm saying this is a really fucking dark bill, even inside their own brains. Is my point. It's been a really weird. DeSantis keeps doing this. DeSantis, when he was in Congress, was like a normal Tea Party Republican, like so crazy, but like not crazy, just like crazy, not understanding how government works and wanting like poor people to die, which is pretty normal for a Republican. But he's doing this right-wing culture war stuff to like try to outflank Trump to the right, which is a total misunderstanding of everything because Trump outflanked everybody to the left in 2016. But the only thing is set immigration. But so DeSantis,
he's doing that right now, isn't he? Isn't Trump doing that with like Social Security and all that shit? Like he's
Yeah, he's on the one hand, he's like what do you mean he scrambles people's brains? Is he end up with like New York Times think pieces where like calling Hillary a hawk and him a dove? It's like because he doesn't talk like a normal politician, but that doesn't mean he's good or cool.
Right.
It just means he understands how to sell stuff for regular people because
Yeah.
he's a con artist.
Yeah.
So,
That's always
but
been his thing.
on the one hand, it's invade Mexico, and we're gonna put a bunch of criminals to death, sort of along these lines. On the other hand, he's talking about how Ron DeSantis is coming for your Social Security, Medicaid. So anyway, DeSantis, this doesn't make sense to DeSantis because he's fucking stupid. So he's still running for president. I guess he's going to announce in a week or two. But he's been on like an international tour. Like he went to England to like it's to some business conference to like try to like get more trade to Florida, between Florida and the UK or whatever. And the quote shot of this,
Yeah.
this is at Lloyd's of London, so it's a bunch of the British version of business schools. They said he was low wattage, and it felt like the end of an overseas trip. Now, by British upper class standards, this is
That's ruthless. Absolutely brutal. That's the same thing as to calling this guy a worthless, do nothing piece of shit. All right, because that's
right.
how like one of them even said he was horrendous or horrendous.
Yeah,
and,
these are people he's
said
trying
no
to.
one left the room thinking, or I would be surprised if anyone came out of that thinking. I would not be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if people came out of that thinking that's clearly not the guy
Right.
about DeSantis. Yeah.
Yeah. No, another quote. Nobody in the room was left thinking this man's going places. Remember, he was there to charm these people. And here's
Right.
another quote. So one guy said he looked bored and stared at his feet. He's got the charisma of like a fucking frog or something.
They also said, and I'm not trying to be fair to DeSantis here, but I guess he had done like they said five European countries, I guess, in 5 days, and this was the 5th one. So he was just real worn out. Like, I'd be worn out too, but you got to get it up for the limey tycoons. If you want to be the goddamn president, that's all they do is shit like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
you want to be president, buddy. It's like it's your one shot. Do not miss your chance to blow. This opportunity comes once in a lifetime, right? It's showtime, buddy. But it's also important to remember that like he's trying to pass a bill because all 50 states' governors' travel plans and records are public, so the citizens of their state can know where the governor is. So he's running for president while trying to pass a bill to keep his travel plans secret because he says he's afraid of being assassinated. Which, why he would waste a bullet on Ron DeSantis is fucking weird to me. But it's clearly because he doesn't want the citizens of Florida, where he might have to run for re-election maybe or run for senator or whatever, to know that he's not actually doing the job of being governor. But also, he's not just silly and uncharismatic, and that's the reason he won't be president. But I want to remember that the reason he shouldn't be president is because he's a fucking psychopath. Here's some more reporting about his time at Guantanamo. Remember, he was a judge in the JAG Corps in the Navy. He was a lawyer.
He was ostensibly in Guantanamo to make sure that they were being treated humanely or something like that, right? Like that was his job. He was the guy that was supposed to make sure that nothing inhumane was happening to the detainees at Guantanamo Bay, and instead he like giggled as they were waterboarded and shit like that.
Yeah,
I mean, kinda though, right? Like that's pretty.
They were in
much
a hunger strike, and he was laughing at them while they're being force fed with the feeding tube. So there were 3 guys there who turned up hanged to death with their arms and hands bound behind their back and their feet tied with rags stuffed in their throat.
So suicide, clearly.
Right. And he ruled it as he was part of the team that helped rule it as suicide.
Yeah.
And these were guys who had never spoken to each other. Like they're in severe, like what do you call it? Solitary confinement. They'd never spoken to each other, but the government's theory of the case was that they did this to embarrass Guantanamo. Like they committed suicide and made it look like a murder to make America look bad. Even though it didn't make any sense. They killed them. This happened in cells. There's like chain link cells that are heavily patrolled every few minutes, and they were hanging there for hours before anybody bothered to get them down. This smells like awful.
Yeah.
This is like this feels evil, and fuck Ron DeSantis.
Sort of like that Russian guy who killed himself by stuffing himself in a duffel bag and then throwing himself off a bridge or whatever.
Yeah,
like, that kind.
There was I was telling you about that true crime podcast about the Dixie Mafia, where the cops are so scared of this guy that this guy owed him money. He shot him 3 times in the head, and the cops ruled it a suicide.
Yeah.
And his son asked him, "Did that guy really kill himself?" And he goes, "In a sense, he did, because he should have paid me my money." And I was like, "This feels like a similar case to that."
That's depending on how you look at it. All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into it, Mark. Writers on strike.
Yeah, so we wanted to talk about why this happened and try to explain to people what's going on. Me and Trey both voted for it, if you need to know. The vote was like 97.85% to 2.15.
Yeah.
So it's an incredible amount of solidarity because people are just fucking fed up. You know, I mean, I was trying to think, what's the thing 98% of people agree on? I was going to
Right.
say that sex is fun, but some people are asexual, so that's not even remotely true.
Yeah.
So anyway, I want to get this off the bat. Showbiz people are not sympathetic working like industry types.
No.
Like a lot of big stars are out the picket lines today, and I get why, because the cameras are there and you want to lend your support, right? But it also makes it look like all of us are fucking millionaires. Like there's so much propaganda floating around the studios that said the average writer makes $250,000 a year, and I'm like, are you averaging me with J.J. Abrams and Dick Wolf?
Right.
Because that's not how math goes, buddy.
Right.
So everything about this is very weird. Like I saw some actors are really struggling too right now, just working at actors, and she was trying to break down how her finances work. And if you get to the end of it, you're like, okay, this is a little bit sympathetic. But she starts off talking about how she's made $5 million over her choice of her career, and then immediately people's brains tune out. But it breaks down to her bringing home like $100,000 a year while trying to maintain residences in 2 countries. You're like, okay, I get it. But still, it's still $100,000 living.
It's also like, and I know we're going to get into this, but it's like, you're right. That does make it unsimple. Nobody I know from when I go back to Salina, like nobody wants to hear you bitching about your show business problems, right?
Right.
You know, when they're fucking roofers and shit, and that's what they're doing. Like they ain't trying to hear it. And I do understand that and I get it. But it's about like with most of the other like disputes we've covered and everything, it's just about the disparity between the amount of money that does exist and it is being made and it is being taken home by the people at the very top who don't do nearly the percentage of work that goes into actually making these products happen that, you know, the writers do, and how much of a difference, you know, there is there, and then other stuff too. But it's not fair, you know,
right.
like it ought to be fair. They're getting away with fucking murder.
There are people who are writing on hit shows who drive Postmates on the weekend and can't afford rent, which doesn't make any sort of sense, right? A hit show means you're making a ton of money for the studio, network, streamer, whichever it is. And it doesn't like workers should have some ownership of their labor. That's the basic organizing principle of, you know, labor and socialism, if you want to get down to it. But the idea that you trade your literal life away, chunks of your life away from your family. If you work in a physical industry like the railroad or whatever, you know, you're trading your literal safety and literal parts of your body. I work with a guy who lost his eye working construction, and he was paid $7 and something an hour. That's fucking stupid and not fair, because the owner of the goddamn company, who didn't risk losing his eye, was driving a super nice truck, right? So anyway, this is so let's start at the beginning. So this strike was going to happen 3 years ago, but then COVID happened and everything shut down. So you can't really threaten to withhold your labor when everything's shut down anyway. So COVID protocols are being lifted on set in May, I think, and that's sort of why everyone's sort of feeling like COVID's over, is part of why this is happening now. And also our contract with the studio is expired. Yada, yada, yada. The Directors Guild and SAG are up soon. Trey, you're in SAG, right? So you might be on double strike soon.
Yeah. Not doing a whole lot of SAG work or anything, so it's not going to take much for me to show solidarity with them. But but yeah, no.
Yeah. The strike's probably going to last at least 2 months, and that's for a few reasons. One, on the bad side for the studios and networks and streamers, that's when it would start pushing back, fucking with fall TV plans. And on the good side for the studios and networks, the big deals they were handing out a few years ago to big time creatives, like say Netflix gave like $100 million, I think, or $200 million to Shonda Rhimes and $100 million to Kenya Barris. Those deals have force majeure clauses for labor stoppages where the contract gets canceled if it lasts 6 to 8 weeks. So if they let it last 6 to 8 weeks, they can claw back hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right. So they're kind of incentivized. Right now, all talks are broken off, and there's because of that, they could save a lot of additional money, the studios and the, you know, producers and whatnot, if they allow it to go a couple of months because it would allow them to get out from under all these massive, crazy
Right.
contracts they gave people a few years back. So they have some incentive to do it. But I mean, you're going to talk. What about the just sort of breaking down generally what the problems are? Like, for example, you're talking about writers not being able to make as much money anymore. Part of that is because if you guys think about it, like TV shows used to be, that meant mostly network shows. Network shows, they got 22 episodes a season spread out over the course of, 9 months or whatever, everything except the summertime. And that was like if you wrote on one of those shows, it was a full-time job and, paid quite a bit of money. Well, now if you think about the shows, many of you all watch 6 or 8 episodes, they'll make a new season every 18 months or something like that. Well, so writers are getting less opportunities. They're working like for not even necessarily for shorter periods sometimes, because it might take just as long, but they get paid on a per episode basis or whatever. So like it's just gone down. And
I'm not making a moral judgment here. This is business. It's negotiation. So, but basically, every time technology disrupts stuff, it creates a loophole that the bosses can drive a fucking truck through. All right. So, like, it was back in the day, it was television instead of movies. Then it was, VHS tapes and DVDs, and now it's the internet and stuff. So, like, the agreement didn't cover the internet. So that's why we had a big work stoppage in 2007, 2008, before it was in the Guild, before we moved to Los Angeles. So it wasn't a part of that one. But so they're like, well, the contract doesn't require us to pay residuals for streaming content. So we don't. We're like, well, what is different from Netflix than TV? And they're like, well, we're on the internet. It's like, okay, but like the job is the same, dog. So like, what the fuck you talking about? So anyway, that was a 100-day strike. And so they basically don't pay any residuals for stuff like this. Like when I worked on a Netflix show, the residuals were like nothing. And there's a bar here called Residuals, and for years and years and years, like your residual checks, it's stepped, right? So it goes down, 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 down. The more times they rerun an episode, right? So you literally get a check for 1 penny at a certain point. And so there was a bar where you could take your check for 1 penny and trade it for a drink. And that was sort of the gimmick of the bar. So the walls were plastered with 1 cent checks. I've literally gotten an envelope with like 20 checks stacked up for 1 penny each or 8 cents each. It's like, what the fuck is this? Just keep it, man. Save the stamp. So that's a lot of it, is trying to get residuals. And by the way, if Netflix TV or not, when it's time to like sign contracts for shows they work on, they're just a little YouTube like streaming show, right? But when they want to win Emmys, they're fucking TV network. So my thing is like, why do you get to win Emmys if you're when it's time to pay up, you say you're not TV? Emmys are for TV shows. Fuck you. Fuck off. There's also sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say also for people, Netflix fans whatever out there, you may have noticed before, Netflix has this sort of reputation for canceling shows kind of out of nowhere. I think, is it normally after the 3-year mark or whatever? Well, what you may not know is that that's part of like the contract and how the guild rules work, is if a show goes more than 3 years, a lot of new things apply, pay raises and things like that. So it's no coincidence that Netflix cancels so many shows around that mark. Or you may also have noticed they'll do like a spin-off show. I love the Narcos shows, right? And I think those shows are great. But if you notice how there's Narcos, then there's Narcos Mexico or whatever, that makes that 2 different shows, right? And instead of one longer running show where people would get paid more money and stuff. So it's all this like gamesmanship and stuff behind the scenes. And it all goes in one direction, right? It benefits upward only every time.
They also correctly figured that like nobody's staying signed up for Netflix. Like if you signed up to watch, I don't know, Glow or whatever, you're not going to cancel it if they cancel Glow. Like the juice isn't worth the squeeze. So they're like, why are we going to keep making this expensive show? We're not going to lose anyone if we cancel it. So that's a business decision, and I get it, but it fucking sucks because fans, it's like an opt-in versus opt-out. You're tricking people into staying subscribed because they just forget to like cancel the subscription. It's pretty cynical. There's also a thing called mini rooms, and this is where it connects to like other businesses. Like I talk a lot about how nobody has a plan for more than 15 minutes from now. that's across all of American society right now. It feels like it's just like these guys don't care if the companies are long-term successful because they're going to get their golden parachutes, and they don't care if like show business still exists in 5 years. Just like the railroad companies don't seem to care if the railroad exists in 5 or 10 years. The government doesn't seem to care if America exists in 5 or 10 years. It's like it's just totally extractive and exploitive with no like backup plan. So that brings us to a thing called mini rooms. All right, so
yeah, mini is in miniature.
Yeah,
miniature rooms.
So when you sell a TV show, the process typically goes like this. You pitch an idea for a show. You write the pilot script. The network makes the pilot. They say they like the pilot. Then you go to series, and then you hire more writers. All right. Trey and I have both done the first step of this process where you write where you sell it and you write the pilot. We've never gotten to go further than that.
Correct.
It's a source of much pain and consternation.
Yes.
So that's the way it went through the dawn of time. Okay. But then they started, but the most expensive part of making a show is not the writers, it's the production, it's the actors. So instead what they'll do is like, we'll give you money for a budget for a mini room where you'll write more episodes of the show. We'll see, if we like those, then maybe we'll go to series. But they only give you money for like 4 writers. So instead of hiring like 2 upper level writers, 2 mid-level writers, and 2 entry level writers, which is important not just for the budget, but for the future of the business, so more people know how to make TV, they just hired a couple of upper level writers to write a couple episodes, pay them half their rate. And it's either take it or leave it. And those upper level writers who used to be way more successful have to eat it because their last job was also a mini room and they haven't worked in a while. So the work product suffers. There's also no money for like new writers to go to set, learn how to do post-production and stuff like that. So like there's no new blood getting experience and breaking in. So like I don't even know what TV is going to look like in 5 years. It's going to be all like MILF Island or some shit.
I mean, yeah, well, so that's what some people have, pointed out. They say, most people remember the big strike in 2007, 2008. I remember it. Like you said, that was before I even started. I was still in college at the time. But a lot of people attribute the like meteoric rise or the true explosion of reality TV to that writer's strike because they got to fill time with something with new content. And if the writers are on strike, what are they going to do? So that's how you get the MILF Islands of the world and things like that. But it's also like TV is not as bad as movies in this regard, but it's always been wild to me how little writers are valued in this town. And I know that's like, you're hearing 2 writers say that, but genuinely, like they, they just want the script to be turned in and then for you to fuck off, essentially. And they want to get it as cheaply and as easily as possible. In movies, if y'all don't know, if you sell a script, they can take it and do whatever the fuck they want to it. Might still have your name on it, despite it having no real resemblance to what you wrote. Now you're getting blamed for a shitty script that you didn't write in the first place. Also, a lot of times writers are prohibited from even being on the set of movies they wrote and things like that. Like, it's just always weird because to me, any like good director or actor or whatever should tell you, the first thing you got to have is a great script. Like, you can't do this shit without writers. And it's like they forget that all the time. And they're constantly trying to find ways to prove that wrong. You know what I mean? They'd love to figure out a way to do it without writers, which,
I got a buddy whose name I won't mention, but I've talked to you about him before. He wrote a couple big hit movies. And one of them was like, had a big buzzy premiere and they were hosting it at Comic-Con. And they had a big panel with the actors and director. Not only did they not put him on the panel, they forgot to put him on the guest list to be able to even watch the fucking panel and premiere of his movie. And it was
right. See, exactly.
And it was shot word for word. But also, like, even my little career I have, like, I worked on a production once where when it wasn't a shoot day, they would lock up the bottled water so the writers didn't go burn through the bottled water budget. Oh, it's just like so fucking weird. So yeah, but like if you're wondering the state of the business overall, whether like people are asking for something unfair that would actually hurt these companies, no. They are not losing money. The writers are essentially asking for 3% of profits, right? So these are profits, right? These are not like no one's asking them to take a loss.
Right. It's not pay cuts for the executives who make insane amount of money anyway. We're not saying like, give us some of your money because I guess everybody knows that would be a non-starter. Do you know what I mean? Like, well, that's not even on the table. Can't make any less than $250 million a year if you're, the chief executive of one of these companies. So yeah, 3% of profits. Completely untenable, apparently.
basically what's happened, like even like Hollywood's never been perfect, but in the 70s or 80s, the people in charge of studios actually liked TV and movies. But since then, we've been taken over by like private equity and like tech bros and stuff who don't care about arts or entertainment or care about making good movies. And because of that, like the incentive with everything, every public traded company or every company basically is just to grow, which is stupid. Like if you make $5 billion this year, that's amazing. You make $5 billion next year, that's also amazing. But Wall Street thinks you have to make 6.5 or you're
Right.
failing.
Right.
It's like, no, why is $5 billion profit bad? In what sense is that? Well, you got to grow. Why? Explain this to me. Explain this
Right.
to me like I'm a fucking child. Most of us get 3% raises, but Wall Street wants fucking 40% returns. I watched this happen when I worked in newspapers, where newspapers were very, very profitable enterprises, even after the invention of like Craigslist ruined classified advertising. But Gannett, which owned USA Today, was able to make 30-some% profit margins. So the newspaper I worked for was only making 25%. So you start laying people off to try to get to 30% to be competitive. It's like, what's wrong with making 25% of your money?
Right.
Like, if I'm a billionaire, I would buy every newspaper in the country and just take a 25% return on my fucking money. That's an amazing return. What are we doing here? This is
Yeah.
insane.
Plus, then
It's
you
like,
get to control the news, which is also pretty
right.
cool if you're a billionaire.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
Bezos did. Fucking look at Rupert Murdoch's whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Buy
Yeah,
up
it's
the
nice to be able to-
newspapers, control the narrative.
Yeah, turn on the TV and the newscast. Today's Jeff Bezos update. Jeff Bezos rules. Looking
Yeah.
good, Jeff. Yeah. So what they come onto, the quickest way to show growth is to cut costs,
Yeah.
right? But you can only cut so far before there's nothing left to cut. And it's also very short-sighted. Going back to nobody's thinking 15 minutes from now, like if I offered you $1,000 for the wheels off your car, that's a quick way to make $1,000.
Right.
You're $1,000 richer for one evening, but then the next day, what happens? You have to get to work, right?
Right.
This is essentially what they're doing as a business practice,
Yeah.
and it's fucking infuriating. Like I would like so the negotiations broke down last night, and I thought they were close to a deal. All right, because the strike hadn't been called yet. Then the WGA put out how far apart they were, and it was like they weren't even remotely negotiating in good faith. It's like some stuff they didn't even make a counter offer for. It was like these guys don't care. They just don't care if the business keeps going. It's amazing to wait. But if you want, let's walk through some numbers real quick. Bernie tweeted this out. Last year, 8 Hollywood CEOs made nearly $800 million, yet pay for TV writers has fallen by 23% over the last 10 years. I stand with nearly 12,000 WGA writers on strike for a fair contract. So then this happened. Adam Conover, who used to host a show on True TV called Adam Ruins Everything. You might be familiar with his work, you might not. Adam Ruins Everything is essentially the same thing we do on this show. It's like, that thing you like? Here's why it sucks and it's evil. Anyway, so he was on CNN. They were interviewing about this, and this happened, which really made me laugh.
That run this industry that say, look, times are changing. We are not making as much money as we once did. This is not the golden era of television, although some of us would argue the shows are great. What do you say to them?
So I'd point out the fact that David Zaslav, the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, which is, the parent company of the network I'm talking to you on right now, was paid $250 million last year, $250 million. That's about the same level as what 10,000 writers are asking him to pay all of us collectively, all right? So I would say if you're being paid $250 million, Ted Sarandos made about $50 million last year. These companies are making enormous amounts of money. Their profits are going up. It's ridiculous for them to plead poverty when the writers who are making their shows, some of them are not able to pay their rent or their mortgages. I literally know writers who have had to go on assistance because they have not been able to make their year. If you look at these companies, they're making more money than ever. It's the people who make the shows for them that are making less.
Adam Conover, thank you so much for coming on because you ruined everything. You may have just ruined my career, but I don't mind.
Yeah. So yeah, eight guys, and they're all guys, making $800 million total. If the WGA had gotten everything they asked for, which no one expects to get everything you asked for in negotiation, it would have cost like $430 million a year. So if guys like David Zaslav had only been paid $130 million instead of $240, we could meet in the middle and everybody's
right. Right.
But This like,
but again,
there's
but
a-
everyone is like acknowledging, right? I've read in articles and stuff from people on the inside of this and everything saying like what you just said, like that's not going to happen, right? I.e.,
Right.
if you took 130 of his paycheck and used that to fix this, everyone that knows what's up is like, yeah, well, that ain't going to happen.
Right.
That's not even on the table, you know?
I don't really even understand what like an executive at like an entertainment conglomerate like does day to day, like what their day to day, like what they sit down on their laptop, what they do. But I guarantee you,
Right.
it's not writing the next episode of Blue Bloods or Succession
Right.
or whatever it is show you like. Um, but there's like, and by the way, if the writers don't get this money, it doesn't somehow go to like HBO subscribers.
Right.
It's like when people complain about pro athlete salaries. It's like the team set the ticket prices for what they can get people to pay. The ticket prices aren't coming down if you cut the athlete's salary. The money just goes to the billionaire owner. But like Americans are like instinctually so management sympathetic.
Yep.
They're essentially bootlickers. Like this tweet went viral earlier, and I want you to see it because it's like absolutely amazing. This strike is immoral. You're denying millions of Americans a mental health outlet, and this will directly lead to suicides. The WGA will be morally culpable.
Well, that's a little bit much.
The only shows that are immediately impacted are like late night talk shows. So this guy's essentially threatening to kill himself because Jimmy Fallon's a repeat tonight.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm sorry, buddy. I don't feel morally culpable if you kill yourself. I don't want you to kill yourself. I want you to stop paying for your blue check and stop being such an idiot. But everyone's such like the media, like, so the showbiz press or just the press in general, what little money they do get from show business is from the studios buying ads. So they're extreme. That's also their sources for who's like all the stuff you read in the trades, the gossip magazines. They're who's getting they're getting their tips from. So all the information comes from the studios. They and PTP, if you're wondering, it's organization negotiates from on behalf of the studios and streamers. So all the news is extremely slanted. They're essentially calling us like greedy fucks who are obstinate, who won't just like take our supper and like take our shit sandwich and gladly eat it. But even the New York Times, okay, so they had this piece written by a writer talking about how there's structural problems with how writers are paid. He talks about residuals and about how like writers rely on residuals to make it when they're during the long lean times when they're not like employed. The headline currently is the Hollywood writer's strike isn't about money, it's about survival. What do you want to guess what the original headline was before they got screamed at?
You tell me.
Hollywood writer explains why writers should be paid for doing nothing. It's not nothing, dog. The studio and the network and the networks and the streamers are making money off reruns. Why shouldn't the people who helped create it get paid off, get a small chunk of that? Like, why is their instinct always that the people at the top who, I don't know, spend all day jerking off on a boat get all the money? And it's impertinent to ask for them to share some small part of it so we can buy fucking food. It's like, this is like going back to like nobody has an idea for the future thing. Like part of the contours of the rail strike that we talked a lot about in leading up to Christmas was the railroad unions were pointing out that something like East Palestine might happen, and which, besides getting a bunch of people hurt, would also cost the railroad a ton of money and maybe lead to further regulations. Right? They were trying to save the railroad companies from themselves, and the railroad companies were like, "No,
yeah, that would cost more money right now," which is something we just do not do.
And here you have a bunch of people who are like, if there are no new writers breaking in. The writers that currently exist are going to have to pivot to new industries because they can't afford to eat. The pot of gold at the end of the rainbow doesn't exist anymore, so no one's even trying to break into this industry as a writer. It's not really to suffer. Like I understand the game, dog. It's like it's a tough game. It's not stable. I never was assured I was going to make it, right? But the pot of gold is the reason you keep trying. There's no pot of gold. No one's going to try. There's going to be no TV shows and movies, which maybe it doesn't matter to anybody outside of like me and I don't know. I feel like Americans watch a lot of TV, but like a lot of these end up being cultural institutions. Like it's just like it's fucking.
Well, that might not necessarily be true, Mark, because I mentioned earlier that they would love to find a way to replace writers or not have writers at all, and it seems like that's how they're going to accomplish what you just. Who says movies and TV have to go away? Maybe writers can go away and the movies stay using a little something called AI or Chat
Yeah.
GPT, you guys know about it. So the writers, as part of this process, outlined a stipulation that said that AI would not be used to write scripts or to like rewrite scripts, and any use of AI would have to be or that anything covered by their agreement could not be used to train AI or use AI in any capacity. And they rejected that, which seems somewhat telling to me. But I'm not all that worried about it yet, because like I don't know if
I'm
y'all
not
fuck with
either.
Chat GPT at all, but I have a little bit, and like
Yeah.
it ain't funny at all. Like it's just
No.
I've asked it to write jokes and stuff, not for me, just to see what I'm up against. And
Right.
I'm pretty confident that I'm more funny than that goddamn robot. So I don't
No.
think they're there yet, but they would love to be there, though, is the point.
I think the way they would use it would be to like send a bunch of scripts to it to train it, and then ask it to write like based upon the first season, feed it the first season of a show and ask it to write the second season, then pay a much smaller writer's room to fix its work product. It would probably be what they would do, but it's just not going to work. It's like, if you're not familiar with it, it's just plagiarism. It's a search function, basically. It scans the internet and tries to organize the answers it finds into like a coherent paragraph, and it often doesn't work.
Right.
So someone out there is supposed to be doing research, reporting, and creative writing for the robot to steal from. There's still has to be a person. Even if you did this gravy train would last a year or two before you run out of stuff to plagiarize, and you still got to find a live human being with an original idea to fucking steal from. But they didn't just reject it. Like this language is really funny. So, like I said, the WGA asked to regulate the use of artificial intelligence on NBA covered projects. NBA is the agreement between the studios and the writers. AI can't write or rewrite literary material. It can't be used as a source material, and an NBA cover material can't be used to train as an AI, like Trey said. The studios rejected that proposal, countered by offering annual meetings to discuss advancements in technology. So we're like saying, please don't replace us with robots. And they countered to come with a PowerPoint presentation once a year to tell us why we're useless.
Yeah, right.
So this is just so fucking hilarious to me. By the way, something that really hit for me is Damon Lindelof was out to strike today. If you're not familiar with his work, he created the HBO series The Watchmen. He was one of the big creative forces on Lost. He has a new show called Miss Davis on Peacock, which is really hitting for me. But it's about like this. It's like a comedy adventure about this underground resistance against this AI that's running the world now. And the writers' room created an AI and just to play with, and used it to name their episodes. And then episodes came out with I think the pilot's titled Mother of Mercy, The Way of the Horse. Has nothing to do with anything. They created this AI as a fuck you to bosses who were trying to replace us with robots, because the robot can't even write the title of a fucking episode that makes sense. Anyway, Diedrich Bader, who's an actor, you've all seen and stuff. He was the guy in Office Space who said if he had $1 million, he'll go a threesome with 2 girls.
Mm-hmm.
So he
Two
posted
chicks,
this,
man.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, it's actually the executives that could be replaced by AI, since their decisions essentially boil down to demographics calculations and could be an algorithm. And he's fucking right. The people who could be replaced by an algorithm are paying themselves $250 million a year.
Right.
While the people who actually create stuff who can't be done by a robot are driving for fucking Postmates on the weekends. And I fucking hate everything. So, yeah.
Yep. Hey, man, I was about to say, Matt, go ahead and throw some up there. Comments from people. This is Gina Woolsey. Gina Woolsey says, robots don't get humor. Just ask my boyfriend. Hey, Zinga. But yeah, it's like Sherry Ann says, Mr. Crowder, you were much funnier than any robot. Well, it's a pretty low bar, but thank you, Sherry Ann. I appreciate that. It's like in the Will Smith classic, I, Robot, he says, but can a robot sculpt a beautiful chair or compose a magnificent concerto or whatever,
Dude, my buddy, like this using AI to do creative stuff. It's like tech bros don't get art, creative stuff, and they fucking hate it. Like if an AI, we talked about Elon Musk buying Twitter in an effort to try to make it people think he's funny, and like it's the one thing he can't buy, right? He can't fucking buy being funny. And these they don't understand art. They never read a book. They fucking hate it. So they're making AI art and trying to make AI scripts. And my buddy sent me a draft. He's doing a college commencement speech, and he's talking about creative work in a time of AI. He's like, you somehow how dystopian it is that the dream of like something like Star Trek or the Jetsons is the robots do the manual labor so we can spend time. Like in Star Trek, they like drink and fuck and do art, learn foreign languages and explore, right? That's what they use their free time for. But in our hellscape, The robots are doing the creative work. My Roomba's going to be doing creative work while I vacuum. That's where we're fucking headed.
Right.
This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, on that note, Sam Sharp Jr. on Facebook says hyper capitalistic hellscape. Yeah, we've been in late stage capitalism, buddy. What a ride it's been, and will continue to be so far. And JDS 7813 says we all hate everything with you. So we're united in solidarity of our shared hatred for the timeline we all live in. There's Natalie Nichols back again, says, what can we do to support the strike?
Basically, I mean, I guess in theory you could start canceling streaming services, but that make me hypocritical because I'm not going to do it because I got to have stuff to watch while I'm fucking not working. But basically, just in general, when people say that workers are being greedy by asking for a chunk of the profits across all industries, just calmly explain to whoever's saying that they're full of shit. Because my dad used to say stuff like that, and I don't understand why workers hate each other more than they hate bosses.
Another repeat commenter and viewer here, and Enemy Anemone says, if
you said it right. Yeah. The first time.
First time for everything. Says, if you're rich, you air quote deserve money for doing nothing. If you're poor and want residuals on your work, you're just being greedy. Yeah, it is this weird phenomenon. I don't know if it's because the whole idea, it's like, oh, Americans dream of one day being the guy that gets to fuck everyone else over and take all the money. It's like, first of all, that's not super healthy aspirationally anyway. I don't dream of being the guy that fucking steps on everybody's neck on my way to the top and like dies alone in my bed dreaming of my childhood sled or whatever. But anyway, people want to do that. Maybe that's why they're okay with why they do the bootlicking, why they side with these tycoons the way they do. I don't know, but it is a very odd dynamic to me. Kim Avery says, those of us in right to work states are completely cowed by fear of losing what we have. Feels like Oliver Twist asking for more.
Yeah. That's one reason these things are ideological, is because a broke workforce is a easily cowed workforce. You can't ask for shit if you're paycheck to paycheck, which is like, that's one of the reasons that, like, even when it doesn't make financial sense to force a strike like they just did, they're going to lose more money than they'll make. One of the reasons I want to talk about this is costing the city of Los Angeles $285 million a day for as long as it goes on.
That's crazy, dude.
Not to mention what's going to cost, and unless people start canceling subscriptions, which won't happen in the short term, but like, there's no fall TV season. That's like, I know not a lot of people watch network TV anymore, but like, they still make a ton of money off of it. If they don't have new shows this fall, they're going to lose billions and billions and billions of dollars.
Dave Gear or Davagier says, America is full of the future rich in a temporary slump.
Was it Alexis de Tocqueville who, after touring America, said that America is a country full of temporarily embarrassed millionaires or something like that?
Yeah. I don't know who said it, but I've heard that before.
I think it was Tocqueville.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, man. It's a goddamn shame though. I don't know why people it's just a hell of a lie that they've sold that number of people in this country. You know what I mean? Because it should be very easy for us to do some French shit and just, set everything on fire and eat them all until they learn to act right. But nobody seems to be willing to do that. So.
they tried in 2020, and the government unleashed a militarized police force to crack everyone's heads. So I can't really. Yeah.
Edge fan says there is no reason for some CEO to make hundreds of times more than the rest of the people working for the company. That is bullshit. Yep.
Didn't used to be that way.
It's the standard now. Yes, it is now the standard. You're right. That didn't used to be the way it was. Not only that not used to be the way it was, they used to genuinely, billionaire types for a long time had this like shared sense of obligation to at least pretend to, give back, or like, it's like some of them had some amount of like almost shame or guilt about their immense wealth. And they would try to offset that by, building housing or giving out food or whatever. Like that used to be a thing that they all did. And I guess you got the fucking Gateses and whatever today, but I'm just saying, there's just been a real shift in the culture of the ultra wealthy and the expectations that people have of them.
Part of it was fraud. Part of it was fraudulent, but it was at least like, the whole, like, was it hypocrisy is the tribute vice pays to virtue, about at least pretending to be good, at least concedes the good exists. But like, I'm not going to say it was sit here and like cape for the DuPonts or whatever, but Noblesse Oblige did make them at least pretend. They did give a bunch of money to charity, even if it was fraudulent to make themselves appear better, but at least we got libraries and shit out of it. I don't see a David Zaslav library. Do you?
Right. Exactly. All right. Well, we'll see how it all goes. We'll be here either way, though. I want to remind you before we go to TreyCrowder.com. Check out the upcoming dates. Come and see me. It's a lot of fun, I assure you. And also, you can go to weeklyskews.com/more. Thank you, Mark or Matt. I forgot. On TreyCrowder.com. Also, you can find a link to my special, Damn Boy. Go to weeklyskews.com/more, or go on Patreon. Look us up. $5 a month. Access to full-length bonus episodes. Support the show in the process. And right before you go, if you're still there, hit that like button and everything, guys. Look at that. Got in under the wire. Like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. But like we said, strike or no strike, it don't affect us here at the Skews. So as long as you keep coming back every Skews, we will too.
We are the bosses. Who are we going to strike
That's
against?
right. Yeah. We'll see you.